Well, thank you, Matt Perino, for that great introduction. This is the Halligans and Half Wheels podcast brought to you by Box 1971, where we're changing the culture of the fire service one fireman at a time. Doing our first podcast abroad. Happy summer to everyone listening. We are at the Old Course Hotel in St. Andrews, Scotland, joined by Matt and our guest, who retired out after 38 years as the Chief Deputy of the LA City Fire Department, Chief Joe Castro. Chief, you have had a hell of a career to talk about. I know Matt was excited to sit down and talk with you about, well, he said that you're the first fire chief he's ever seen that had an Emmy. So can we just kind of jump in right there and talk about that, and then we'll kind of highlight your career and some experiences and such.
It's funny you mentioned that because when people read my resume, that's something that always jumps up at them. And it's probably because of its uniqueness. It's something that essentially is a non-entity in my mind as far as my accomplishments as a firefighter. But nevertheless, it does get a lot of notoriety. And it's a somewhat funny story. I was a captain working in Hollywood at a fire station, and I got asked to host a program that the LAFD Community Relations Department was developing. And it was a monthly television news program where we would basically educate the public about what the fire department was doing during that seasonal time of the year and what they could do to help us, kind of an educational preparation type thing. So they had a budget for it, they got a grant, and they hired a professional production team to do it. And we had a director, and they had myself and another firefighter who happened to be a female as the co-hosts. And the community relations department would write the script and the content, and then we would meet and film this, and then it would be on a local syndicated television channel.
That's crazy.
Yeah, a couple firefighters, no acting experience, no nothing, and so we did it for I think 18 episodes, a little over a year period of time, and then I think we ran out of money and we stopped doing it, and then about maybe just after we stopped doing it, I got a letter from the Screen Actors Guild, which is the entity that oversees television awards through out of Hollywood, and they said that the show had been nominated for an Emmy Award, and as the co-host, I was able to receive the Emmy Award if it won, but I had to be a temporary member of the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, and back then they needed $300. This was in probably 1985.
That's big money.
I'm sorry.
That's big money.
Oh yeah, it was. That would be like $1,000 by today's all. And I had two young kids at home. I had, just bills, and the last thing I wanted to do was to waste $300 on something that I didn't think was going to win. And to tell you the truth, wasn't that important to me. Nevertheless, the female firefighter, who I always maintain was a lot smarter than I was, she spent the $300, got the temporary SAG, and then, much to my surprise, it won the Emmy Award. And she got to go to the awards ceremony, got her Emmy trophy, and I got a little paper certificate in the mail that said I won an Emmy. And for years, she tormented me. We'd work at the same station every once in a while together in Hollywood, and she would bring her Emmy Award down to the kitchen table and sit it in front of me to ridicule my stupidity. But nevertheless, it just ended up being kind of a funny story.
Did you at least frame the certificate?
No, I didn't. In fact, I don't even know where it's at. And ironically, I put it on my resume. It's an accomplishment, and
That's
it's
right.
unique. And for my battalion chief interview years ago, I came in and sit down, and they had a couple of different interview boards, and one was outside interviewers, person from the personnel department, another HR analyst, and then a person from the community. And that part of the interview was basically, they look at your resume and they ask you questions about more executive and managerial stuff. We had an operational side of the interview also, but with a different panel. And I sat down, and again, my background is 99% operational. And I sat down thinking, what am I doing talking to these people? And the very first question out of her mouth the member from the community was, I'm looking at your resume, Captain Castro, and I want to hear about your Emmy Award. and I had developed an answer, for it. And as it turns out, I ended up getting the top interview. I got like a 399s on that interview.
Wow.
And I think primarily because of I had something else that some of the other candidates didn't have the offer. If you think about it, we all came from the same department, probably had similar backgrounds, maybe some nuances in difference of education and whatnot, but I was the only person, and back then I wasn't smart enough to utilize that uniqueness.
Right.
But it was, that softball was tossed to me right off the bat of the interview, and it ended up being successful.
That's crazy. So where did you grow up at? Are you a California kid?
Yes, I was born in San Diego, and I think when I was, before we started school, we moved up to a beach town about 18 miles southwest of downtown Los Angeles called Redondo Beach.
Okay.
It's where the Beach Boys were from. It's a real famous surfing area. Back then, it was a little sleepy beach community. A lot of people didn't want to live there because it was foggy all the time. I still live there, but now it's like most Southern California coastal real estate areas. It's crazy expensive, and all those little 800 square foot Spanish bungalows have all been torn down, like my place is, and they build 4,000 square foot houses that are worth $4, $5, $6 million, and it's changed considerably. But I've basically been a South Bay, it's what they call that area, the beach cities, South Bay boy for basically my entire life.
So what led you to the LA City Fire Department?
I graduated high school, and I met a girl who I went to high school with but never knew her. And I met her, and I started dating her. Had just enrolled. I was just turned 18 years old. I just enrolled in a local community college. Not a clue what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't even know what I wanted to study. Had no idea. No career path, nothing. And I met this girl whose father was an LA City firefighter. And the first time I met him, he shook his hand, and he's talking to me, and what do you think you might like to do for, a job? And I said, I really don't know yet. And literally, I just turned 18. And he said, you ever thought about being a firefighter? I said, not really. And he goes, well, let me show you this calendar. And he showed me the LAFD shift calendar,
okay,
which the dates are segregated in color by the platoon.
Okay.
Right? A platoon is red, B platoon is blue, C platoon is green. He was a C platoon firefighter. He goes, see these green days? Those are the days I work. And I go, those are the only days you work? 10 days a month? He goes, yeah, they're 24-hour shifts, but that's it. I go, what do you do on your days off? Whatever I want. And so I said, sign me up. So he invited me down to his fire station. He worked in South Central LA, Watts Real Active Task Force 64.
Yeah.
Invited me down there for lunch. It was like, back then I was in high school, I was a wrestler.
Okay.
And it reminded me of being with my wrestling team. Guys screwing around in the kitchen, laughing. All of a sudden they get up and go on a run and come back 10 minutes later. And I thought this would be a great job. And so back then it was 1977, and back then the fire department vocation didn't have, in my mind, the sense of glamour that it has now.
Sure.
It was a civil service. You could either be a tree trimmer, a cop, a firefighter, or pick up trash, in a trash truck.
Right.
Get in one of these lines, and it's a civil service job. It's got some, okay pay, decent benefits, and a good pension.
Right.
And so I called up and put my name on the list to take the test. 4 months later, I took the written, took the physical agility, and back then, the physical agility counted for half of your final position. And the better you did on the physical agility, the better your score was. It wasn't like pass-fail like it was now.
Right.
And so it was weighted. And back then, I was a wrestling team. I was a triathlete. I was super fit, and I did really good. Got up there, and then I went in for my interview. And to be honest, about the only thing I knew about the fire department was that they rode around in big red trucks and they smashed shit with axes. And that's kind of what they asked me questions, and I did. I think I got like an 85 on my interview. And back then, you kind of had to get maybe a 90 to get a job because guys were getting military credits, 10
Okay.
points for military credit. But somehow that ended up being enough to get a job, and I was hired in 1978 as an 18-year-old kid.
Wow.
And I basically walked in the first day of the academy, and they said, here's a match, here's fuel, here's oxygen, and here's water. And our academy started our level of medical training was a first aid book that the Boy Scouts used. There were no EMTs. We had paramedics, but they were civilians. And literally, we had I think a 16-week academy, and 16 weeks later, I'm working as an 18-year-old punk kid, working in a fire station. I'll never forget my first night working there. We had a couple fires in my first shift, but the first night we went and did what we call night hotel inspections, fire prevention inspections, and we had to go in a bar. And the AO was with me, and we're going to go in and inspect this bar. And he turns around to me. He was an old Vietnam vet, big tough dude, and turns around and he goes, "You're not even old enough to come in here, are you?" And I said, and he was joking. He knew I was young, but he didn't know how young I was.
Right.
And I said, "Actually, I'm not." And he goes, "How old are you?" And I go, "I'll be 19 next month." He goes, "You're not even old enough to come in here." And I was in there, and it was first and only full-time job I've ever had. Wow. And I stayed for 38 and a half years.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, this is the first podcast abroad, sitting here and watching you talk about this and reminiscing about your career, we are literally overlooking the 17th fairway here at the Old Course Hotel. There's golfers passing by. We have been blessed with the greatest job on earth, and now you have been able to reap the rewards of that great career. We met last year during the St. Andrews Classic tournament, which you won.
Yes.
You spanked my ass. You played exceptionally well that week, and I hope you play well again this week. It's been an amazing, keeping in touch with you. We need to get out to Pebble Beach and play in the tournament that you want us to come out and play in. That's a big deal. Are you a part of that? I know you won it.
Yes, I played there for 30 years.
Holy cow.
So about 30 years ago, I got this invitation to play in this golf tournament. It's called the Southern California Firemen's Golf Association. And they've had this tournament for over 50 years now. It's the longest running private tournament in Pebble Beach's history.
Wow.
And so I got invited to play about 31 years ago. I've been playing golf a couple years. And I remember I took my wife up there, and she saw the bill. And back then, I think it was maybe $600 to play 2 rounds of golf, spend 2 nights at the lodge, Pebble Beach. And she goes, "Oh, it's just a lot of money." And I said, "Sweetie, don't worry. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." So we went up there and we played. And next year, she sees in the checkbook, "Hey, I thought you said this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing." And I said, No, I said once a year thing. And I've been every year since. And it's I mean, Jeremy, you really hit the nail on the head. We have a blessed existence. We have a job that we love going to work every day.
Yeah.
And the fact that it compensates us well enough to, in my retirement years, this is my 10th trip to Scotland. And I love this place beyond measure. It's love at first sight.
Amen.
It has a spiritual power over people that love golf, passionate about golf. And this place, there's no place on earth where that spiritual power is more prevalent. And,
Amen.
And it's, my dad's ashes I buried on the Swilken Bridge on the 18th fairway, which was his wish. He never got to come back here. He died before before I could pay, before I had enough money to pay for him to come back here.
Sure.
And so, but when he told me about St. Andrews maybe 50 years ago, we were watching the Open on TV, and he said, "That's St. Andrews, that's the home of golf, and that's where I'm going to go play there one day, and that's where I'm going to have my ashes buried."
Right.
So he passed away, and I was able to come back here, and I walked out there at midnight about 5-6 years ago and spread his remains. And now every time I bought my mom a big lithograph of the bridge, and she has that knowledge, and that's where I want my ashes spread too. So I'm gonna task you with that, Jeremy.
That's fair.
When I croak, hopefully a long time from now.
Hopefully.
You make one last trip back here, stuff me in that burn right next to the bridge.
You know what's crazy is So my dad passed, and I told Mom, I said, I've got very little of my dad's cremains left, right? So I wear it right here. And I said, Dad is the reason I play golf.
Yep.
And it was something that he and I shared together. And so I did almost identical to what you said. I waited till it was dark and there was nobody on the course, and I walked down there. And of course, I had me a few little nips and was feeling really good. And I went down and had me a good cry and a cigar, and let my dad go out in the sea. He never got over here, but we always talked about it.
Yep.
We always talked about this place and how awesome this place is.
Yep.
And so, it was very apropos to be able to do that because, part of him's here and then part of him's at home with my mom. So, very nice. But I'll take you up on that task. We'll make that happen for you.
You got it.
So you're a backstep fireman in LA. You're working in busy houses or slow houses?
Spent most of my time over the course of many years in different ranks. Most of my time was either in South Los Angeles, Watts, referred to sometimes, but South Central Los Angeles, which is a very active, two big task forces down there, Task Force 33 and Task Force 64. And I was there in different ranks as a AO, a Captain 1, a Captain 2, and a Battalion Chief. And then probably the longest stint I ever had at one station was a truck captain at Task Force 35 in Hollywood. And so I spent another probably 12 years at that one station in Hollywood. That's where I spent most of my time.
What kind of rig is that when you say a ladder captain? Is that a rear mount, a tiller?
All our trucks are tillers.
The only way it should be.
We don't have any quints or any fixed non-tiller. All our trucks have or belong to what we call a task force house.
Okay.
Where they have a fully staffed engine, and our fully staffed engines have 4 members on it: captain, an engineer is the driver, and 2 firefighters.
Okay.
And then the light force is what it's called. Consists of a fully staffed truck, which has 5 members, has a driver, which we call an apparatus operator, the acronym AO.
Yep.
The Captain 2, which was the task force commander, is the captain. And then we have 2 firefighters in the jump seats and 1 firefighter tillering.
That's the best job on earth.
And well, that's big staffing. In fact, LA County, which is right next to us, has 1 less member on every company than we do. We've been able to maintain that staffing. It's a fight, but we've maintained it. But then also, in addition to that truck, because there's no water on that truck.
Right.
And in addition to that truck, there's a pump or an engine, whatever you want to call it, that follows the truck and has an engine on it.
Okay.
Or an engineer driving it. So it makes it pretty versatile, right? We can, in like high days when we need to augment with extra resources, we can hire 3 extra people to ride on the engine. It gives it a versatility. We have 48 truck companies in the LAFD out of 106 fire stations.
Truck strong.
Yes, it's big truck. LA County for years, same size department essentially. They at one time had 13 truck companies, so our 48. So we have always been a very structural firefighting based department, and it is heavily staffed in trucks, both culturally and physically.
Now, is LA still using wooden ladders? Wooden ladders?
Yes. Yeah. We for years they use a company called LA Ladders, and they have a wood-based truss system and rungs, Douglas fir. They require a lot of maintenance, and they're heavy.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of arguments because we're one of the last holdouts. I think San Francisco still has. I'm not sure about Boston and New York, but
I know New York is aluminum.
okay.
Yeah.
And again, one thing we don't have. We used to have all the trucks had 50-foot extension ladders. So, and it was
those
they
poles.
had a separate bed where the 50-foot, we called it the banger.
Yep.
The banger ladder. It had tormentor poles, and basically it took 4 to 6 people to raise it. And it was a heavy ladder. They took those off maybe 20 years ago. So each one has 2 35-foot ladders, 2 24-foot straight ladders, 2 20-foots, 16, couple roof ladders, and that's usually the complement.
Now, when you talk about all those truck companies, are they all set up identically? Like all of the apparatus?
Yes.
So if you're detailed out to, wherever, you're in North Hollywood, now you're downtown somewhere else, that you don't have to worry about opening a compartment and it not being almost the same.
And yes and no. The only difference is that we have different manufacturers of trucks now.
Right.
And so over the years, and I think the life expectancy back then, I think when I came on, we had a lot of trucks that were 20-something years old. In fact, I remember my first assignment. I was born in 1958, and I got hired in 1976. And my first assignment, we had like a 1970 Seagrave truck, and it broke down, and we got one of our reserve trucks. It was the same year that I was born. It was a 1958 Hirsch Ariel with an old, non-synchronized transmission. Yeah. It had a engine forward situation with a big old, like a tachometer was like as big as a dinner plate, and it was really a hydromechanical. It was an old thing.
Right.
Now our fleet's new, and one of the reasons is because we run the wheels off them.
Right.
Back then, I think back then when I came on, a busy day in the LAFD would be like 600-700 responses. Now an average day is 1,700 responses.
Wow.
And it's just the rigs don't last that long anymore. We
beat them up.
We beat them up. And primarily EMS, obviously, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to tell what we're going out the door on. I mean, it could be, you're going to a chest pain call, and then 10 minutes later you're clearing that call where what do you guys call them, rescue ambulances?
Right.
The RA.
Yeah.
Yeah. That takes the patient away. You get back on the rig, and before you can get back to the house, you may be going to a structure fire.
Yeah.
So you're constantly on the go.
Yep.
There's not really much downtime in LA.
Absolutely. That misnomer or that romantic notion of firefighters sitting in a station playing checkers with the Dalmatians sitting over there in a corner are long gone.
It's non-existent.
They're real busy. Yeah, real busy now.
So what made you want to promote? You came up the ranks, right? You earned your time. You weren't a 5-year guy trying to promote, correct?
Yep. I took the AO job. I gravitated towards a truck company right off the bat, and I love truck work. I love going up on the roof and ventilating. Back then we had 2 on the whole fire department. 48 trucks, we had 2 Hirsch rescue tools. Our vehicle extrication was called a porta-power kit, and it was a little hydromechanical type thing that they used for body repairs.
Correct.
Right. And if you had somebody you need to extricate, we had you had to call one of the trucks, or we had a heavy rescue that had it come in. But over the years, I gravitated towards the trucks. I just love that type of work. And to be honest too, back then the engines were running 3 or 4 times more than a truck. So you went to bed, you slept all night, and if you got up, you were going up for a fire. And
as it should be.
It was just like the funnest thing I've ever done is tiller in the back of a truck.
Amen.
Driving downtown LA, going to seeing a big loom up, And back then we didn't have intercom systems, so tiller, and you're back there all by yourself, couldn't hear a freaking thing. And
keep the light in the center.
Yep. They would signal you. This would be this, waving hand in a circle as we got a loom up, and that's how you did it. Now with the intercom systems, even the tillers are enclosed. The cab, all that apparatus were open cab back then. We didn't have any enclosed rigs. All of them were open cabs. It rained, you got soaking wet. We used to put cellophane over the horn and the radio. Those were the 2 things. But and then as a truck firefighter, I wanted to be the truck driver, the AO.
Right.
So with 2.5, 3 years on, I took the AO tests, and I did well enough to get a job on that. And then, to be honest, I got assigned to a Task Force 33 in South LA, going to 3, 4, 5 firefighters or fires a shift, and I was thinking, I will stay here my whole career.
They're gonna have to kick me out.
I did. And but I had a great captain. This guy was he was one of the first captains on the job that really codified specific operational steps and procedures for roof ventilation, different types of roofs. He had a chronological step-by-step method to ladder, to identify the roof, to identify the construction features, the sheeting direction, to safeguard yourself against walking out in the middle and falling through. He had all this process, and some of the old school guys used to badmouth him, but this guy was sharp. His name was Denny Willihan. He's truly the best firefighter I ever saw. He'd be up there swinging an axe with us and using a chainsaw, but he was the best teacher for tactical operational stuff, and he would drill us into the ground. I mean, on weekends we'd go out at 8 o'clock in the morning. We would catch lunch out in the street somewhere and drill till 5 o'clock, and he is the one who motivated me to want to be a captain, because I was thinking I'm going to drive the truck till I retire. And then when I saw him, I thought I want to be like him. I want to teach guys. I want to develop operational policies. I want to make us more professional, and I want to make us more safe and more efficient. And I've always been a big believer of balancing safety and efficiency. I think they have to coexist. I can talk about it later, but it's one of the problems I started having with some of these offshoot organizations that would say everybody goes home.
Right.
And I get what they're saying when they say that, but I could design operations where everybody goes home,
but the homeowner.
But we're not doing our job.
Right.
To me, I think if I had one virtue, I simplified our mission. And our mission was, when Mrs. Smith calls and she's in trouble, and that's why she's calling, our job is to go get her out of trouble, to fix that problem. And everything else is ancillary to support that mission.
Correct.
And so that makes us, and there are fires. I mean, I hate to say it, but there are fires when you roll up and there's cars in the driveway and there's fire blowing out of the downstairs windows, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's somebody out screaming in the street that the kids are up there. That while our safety is always important, the bottom line is, why people love us is because we're going to turn up the collar of our turnout, and we're going to crawl through that window and go rescue that kid.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach, and it was all because of that one captain, and that became my mantra. And I made captain relatively. I think I had 9 years on the job. I wasn't even 30 years old. And then I stayed a captain for 17 years.
How'd you keep that golden horseshoe in your ass?
How'd
you keep the golden horseshoe in your ass?
Because
you had you had a hell of a run.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. It was funny. I think what happened was I was at the same station for 12 years, and I actually got a little bored. I felt myself getting a little lazy.
Okay.
We're getting a new rookie every 3 months, same chainsaw drill, same roof drill, time and time again. And I felt myself getting a little complacent. And right about the time when I felt myself get complacent, we got a notice that came out that said, hey, the battalion chief exam is in 30 days. The last day to file is tomorrow.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, if I go file tomorrow, I'll study for 30 days and I'll give it one shot. And I did, and I lucky enough to get a job. I barely passed the written, but I got a really good interview score. I got the job, and then, kind of the rest is history.
Where did you feel that you had the most influence in your career? What rank did you feel like you had the most, I hate to say the word power, but I don't know any other way to say it. Where did you feel that you had the most at?
Well, my final position was a bureaucratic position, commander of emergency operations, at a corner office on the top floor of City Hall. And even though I am super removed from the mission worker at that point, I had the ability to have effect on the job more there than anywhere. I put my nose in things that the previous chief deputies never did. For example, the promotional process. I wanted to develop, I would meet with the people and say, this is what I want the captain's tests to test. I want the captain's test to test their judgment ability at a crisis. Now, you're going to figure out a way to do that through the simulation, through the written questions or whatever. But I wanted to create leaders that the cornerstone of their leadership was operational prowess, right? Not great test takers, not great memorizing meaningless facts about fire prevention. I wanted the cornership of their leadership to be operational credibility. And that's what and part of that is being able to test their judgment ability, right? To have a design a test. And I was able to affect that. And I think because I had a feeling that we were largely going away from operational prowess. And if you go back to my previous statement that the only thing that's important is us getting Mrs. Smith out of her bind,
right?
We have to be able to figure things out, and we have to be able to teach that, and you got to have the work ethic and the professionalism to maintain equipment, all that stuff that is the old school work ethic.
Right.
And there was good in our LAFD had to grow up a little bit because there was good in our work ethic and there was bad in our culture too. We had to fix some of that stuff.
Sure.
But
that's the hard thing, is to fix culture.
Big time.
To get buy-in from people to, a lot of what I see today are people using buzzwords and, they go to these conferences and they get information and they come back and they drop buzzwords. And there's no action. There's no call to action. And it seems like that you had the ability, once you made to the top floor, literally, that you had the ability to affect that change and to make it. And not everybody would use that. They would probably just squander it away and say, I'm here. I've arrived. Let me have my office job.
One of the things I always wanted especially my chief officers, at one time I had like 68 chief officers reporting to my office, right? All the emergency operation BCs and ACs out there. That's a big number. And that was the number I wanted to grab hold of. And I wanted to get those guys, and I wanted guys and girls, and I wanted to make them, I said, when you're out inspecting, battalion inspection, you're going through that truck company, I not only want them to have the feeling that you have the ability to take any tool out of there and start it and maintain it. That's what I want you to do during inspection. If you're going to inspect it and you're opening a compartment, why not take the chainsaw out, make sure it has fuel, and actually start it? But you have to know how to do that. And that's what I want. I want them to have confidence in you. I want you, when you pull up at an incident, not to have them say, oh, shit, the chief's here. And, I want them to go, oh, thank God the chief is here. He's going to watch out for us.
Right.
He's the guy he's not micromanaging us, but he's the guy that's watching out. He's the guy that's helping us. He's contributing to us fixing Mrs. Smith's problem. Not, oh, God, I'm going to physically turn off listening to him.
Right.
And that was kind of my push during my last 4.5 years on the job, was to increase the level of operational expertise of the chief officers, who then expect the same thing from the captains, who expect the same thing from the firefighters.
It just hit me as we were talking about this. You have a high school education, and you were number 2 in charge of the second largest fire department in the United States. Now, if you apply for a job as a fire chief somewhere, you got to have a sheepskin hanging on the wall.
Yep.
You were a blue-collar guy that rose through the ranks of a blue-collar job. That's crazy.
And how that happened, it was funny because I was a battalion chief for almost 10 years.
Right.
Thinking I was in Hollywood, Battalion 5, probably one of the greatest battalion assignments in the country. And I had about 5 years left, I think, to work. And what happened is our fire chief got fired, and they appointed an interim fire chief who had worked for me when I was at Task Force 33. When I was an AO, he was a firefighter. And that's when I was learning this teaching stuff. And this guy was a sponge. And obviously very successful because he was appointed as the interim fire chief.
Okay.
And what happened was the commander of emergency operations was having problems with our union. They were fighting back and forth.
Okay.
And he went to the union and they said, hey, you got to get rid of this guy. We need someone new in there. And he said, okay, just out of curiosity, if you were making the call, who would you put in there? You union guys, if you were making the call, who would you put in as commander of emergency operations? And the guy said, I'd put in Joe Castro. And he was the chief, the interim chief was my buddy, my very close friend. To this day, I still play golf with him every Saturday. And that was just what he wanted to hear. And I was working one day, and I get the call, Chief Featherstone. I answered, and he said, hey, so what would you say to me bringing you down to be the commander of emergency operations? And so I'm skipping three different, I'm skipping assistant chief, deputy, all the way up. And I said, I'll do whatever you want, but there's going to be a big learning curve. And luckily, the guy who I took his place was also a mentor of mine, and he started mentoring me in the executive level of it, because that job is balancing politics and operations.
That's a tough.
Managing a $700 million annual budget. I mean, it's a lot of. I never worked harder in my life and never was happier in my life. 17-hour days, 6-7 days a week. Wow. But to answer your question, you're right. That era is gone. Right now, you have to have a master's degree to get in that position.
That's right.
And I would think I was very fortunate timing-wise to be able to do that and get in that spot. And it was just, the capstone of my career really is being able to, never in my wildest dreams. I'll never forget when I was a rookie in the academy, having the commander of Bureau of Emergency Services come out and tell us what he expected of us. And this guy, his name was Don Anthony, this guy was a legend. They call him the Doberman, and because of his bite.
Right.
And man, I looked up to that guy, and he's the guy who pinned my AO badge on me and became a friend of mine later. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would be in his office. And when he asked me to come up to do that job, the memory of Don Anthony, how could I refuse attempting to be in that position? And consequently, one of my greatest responsibilities, thing that I enjoyed the most, was going out to every recruit class before they graduated and saying, here's what I expect. And I had developed a lecture and to help these guys understand that thing that I keep talking about is helping Mrs. Smith, and what an inescapable obligation that is.
Right.
And how if either one of us screw that up, we're both in trouble. And
it's the most rewarding job, and it's a pressure-filled job.
Yep.
And I tell people all the time, we get paid for what we're willing to do, not what we're doing.
Yep.
And what we will do is most people don't want to think about. They don't want to talk about what we will do through the course of a day, right? Yep. There are things that we see. We were talking before we started about the Boyd Street fire, and luckily that happened after your retirement. But I want to say that incident and those guys sitting down and talking about it has done more for members of the fire departments wearing our PPE properly. We were talking about an incident where I kind of want you to go over that incident that happened with you, if it's not too belaboring for you to talk about the young guy, the young recruit, and his gloves going through a roof.
You know what? And let me just, I'll talk about that in 1 second.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you about an incident that I went on that if someone asked me recently, what would be the most defining incident you ever went on? And I think I had about, maybe 2-3 years on the job at the most. I hadn't promoted to AO yet, still a firefighter, and we responded to a restaurant fire in the middle of the night, pouring rain, open cab apparatus, getting soaking wet, and we go up there, and it's a big restaurant, coffee shop type thing, burning pretty bad. We were in staging, waiting, and we kind of heard this panic radio call, and I remember seeing an aerial ladder fly out of the bed and go up to the roof, and all this panic stuff, and what had happened was the roof had come in. It was what we call pre-1933 unreinforced masonry construction. And it was an arson fire where a guy had poured a bunch of gas in the attic and lit it off. And what had happened was those walls, that they didn't have any steel reinforcement. And when they get hot, they bow out. And then when they bow out, the roof joists give way, and it creates like a slide. There was a truck company up there, and the truck company had the slide. Everybody got up over the parapet except the AO. And the AO got up over the parapet and held on to it until he couldn't hold on anymore, and then slipped down into the fire. The other members got off the other side of the parapet. They ended up falling, getting hurt pretty bad, but the AO was in this fully involved building. My company got dispatched to go find him. And this was after we'd been ladder piping, heavy stream in the fire for 20 minutes. And we went in there, and the roof had come in, and, it's still steaming and smoking underneath there. And we're in there searching for this guy and can't see anything. And, just one of those awful situations. And then finally, I remember hearing some guys start screaming, they're yelling. And I walk over there, and what? And we're asking what's happening, and he's right here. And I remember I couldn't see anything, and I got down on my hands and knees, and I remember seeing the D-ring to his turnout coat, and then seeing his leg, which was all burst open because of the flesh and the heat.
Right.
And we ended up grabbing the body and pulling it out, and he was obviously dead. His name was Thomas Taylor, and he was an apparatus operator, father, married guy, had 2 kids. I think he was 28, 29 years old, and he died.
Wow.
And I remember as a 20-year-old kid, without a big slide carousel of traumatic incidents in your head to reconcile this, that was a tough thing. And what happened was, the day after that fire, I went to this gym that I belonged to, and I was sitting outside the weight room getting ready to go in, and a girl that worked at the gym I knew walked by, and she said, "Hey, I know you're a fireman. I heard about that fire last night where that guy died." And I go, "Yeah, I was actually there." She goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, we went in there and pulled the body out." And she said, "I got a stupid question to ask." I go, "Go ahead." She goes, "What were you guys doing up on that roof?" And I said, "Well, we go up there to cut a hole to let the heat and smoke out so that the firefighters can get in and extinguish, give her the party answer."
Right.
And she goes, "Joe, I get it, but it was a restaurant fire, 3 a.m. There's nobody in there." And I could not convince her that risk that we took that resulted in this, especially in the fullness of time,
Right.
the death of a member of our department, I could not convince her that it was worth it. And that was the defining moment, was that I thought, you know what? The public doesn't expect us to die at an incident like that. They don't expect us to die at an incident like that. And what can we do to train ourselves? I'm not saying we don't go up on roofs at commercial buildings,
Right.
but what can we do to make it safer, to make it more survivable, to manage that risk? And one of my crowning achievements on the job was finally codifying a risk policy, an operational risk policy for our members, to be able to allow them to make a good judgment decision about when to hang it out, when to be a little cautious, or when to stay outside, and
Right.
be able to specifically codify that policy so that members understood it. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
Because what's risky to me may be not risky to you or crazy risky to you.
Sure.
Depending on your background and your experience and your knowledge. So that's kind of the big things. That was a big incident for me. Obviously, I received a Medal of Valor for a fire that I had where we rescued a rookie that fell into an attic when we were on a roof. And as I was mentioning later, without getting in, it's a long story, but when he fell in, he stepped in the wrong spot. He was a rookie. He was trying to do his best, and we turned around, and I just got up to the roof when I saw him go in. And instinctively, I see the AO turn around, sees him. AO reaches and grabs him, and he goes in too. So we have 2 members in this attic. They're still hung up on the ceilings or the rafters, but they're hanging up there, and this fire is roaring out on them. And we were able to grab on to the AO, pull the AO out a little bit, and then we were able to ultimately pull the rookie out, whose turnouts were literally burning. I mean, literally flames coming off his turnouts. And we got that guy down, and I was a guy who I would say 100% compliance of personal protective equipment would be how you are right when you come out of the tower. I would probably be a 50%. In terms of, I rarely wore gloves on a roof. I frequently didn't have everything all buttoned and zipped up, and out of laziness, out of comfort, out of trying to act like a badass, I didn't always adhere to that.
Sure.
But when I pulled that guy out, or we pulled him out, and we cut his turnouts off, and I saw that not only was he not going to die, he was probably going to come back to duty. He had some significant burns, but nothing I think, thought that. And I said, the reason this guy is going to come back and the reason he's going to live is because he just got out of the academy where they drill them into the ground that every single time no skin is exposed and everything is on, and everything was brand new. His turnouts were brand new. And I think I had a 10 or 15-year-old turnout coat that was virtually worthless. Because that we all like that, right? We don't want a big yellow brand new turnout coat. We want that big dirty one, which has carcinogens all over it, and we're going to eat in it.
Yeah.
And I remember I made every guy that on my company order new turnouts, and I became, when I saw the value firsthand of pulling somebody out of a fire that survived because they had the PPEs, that was another defining moment of me to be a micromanager when it came to areas of safety. And
I don't think that's micromanagement. I think that is what we are drilled to, but complacency sets in, right?
Yep.
You run 5, 6 fire alarms. You don't put your stuff on all the way. I think the big thing right now is, guys, the glove thing I want to talk about. I want to come back to that. But the one thing like I see currently on the job is waist straps, SCBA waist straps. They're there for a reason, but we get lazy when we come out of the rig, right? And some places don't have them in the cabs anymore.
Yep.
They've got them in a compartment. So they just, it's another step, right?
Yep.
I see a lot of that happening on the job. When we talk about that rookie, did he come back to duty?
Yes. In fact, it's kind of full circle. It's kind of a unique story. He was a young kid on the job. As a captain, I had to call his mom on the cell phone and say, listen, we're taking him to the hospital. He's burned bad. I remember I went there for his surgeries. The hospital took his mom out to lunch when we were waiting for the skin graft surgeries. And but he did not only come back to work, but about 3 years ago, he was awarded the Medal of Valor for rescuing a couple kids that were trapped in a fire. He rolled up on a rescue ambulance coming in there, and he went in there and rescued. So not only did he return, but he returned to be a Medal of Valor winner for the LAFD.
So he paid it back.
Absolutely.
Later on. We talked about the glove. Let's come back to the gloves. So roof operations, the accepted practice, I know that it happened with the Boyd Street fire. Gloves became an issue.
Yes.
And there was a cultural issue like back in the day. Walk me through when you first started the culture and then kind of how it became what it is.
The frequent thing you'd hear, and my hypothesis of why a lot of truck firefighters don't wear gloves on a roof is because they get away with it 99 and 9/10% of the time. You can go up there, and there was all kinds of excuses. I have better feeling with the chainsaw coming up over members without these big, heavy, thick gloves. And, I can climb better. I can, all these other things, all these excuses of why not to wear. A lot of captains, it's tough to change the radio channels with the big, thick gloves. So I'm going to stand back a little bit. I'm not going to have the gloves. And my ultimate conclusion is you're as good as you think you are, you'll figure out a way to use the chainsaw with the gloves. You'll figure out a way to change the radio channel with the gloves. But the bottom line is, historically, is that when these truck firefighters, and it happens all over the country, they get away with it for 10 years, hundreds of roofs, never have a problem. And that one time they fall in, and they're now getting burned, their hands are useless. They can't call for help. They can't even open a door. They put their hands in their pocket or they fold them up. And the hands are horrible places to get burned. I mean, it really is. And it's just having the fortitude and the discipline to continue that every single time you're on a roof for your whole career is not an easy thing to do. And it took me being the firsthand witness of the virtue of being protected to finally drive it through my thick skull that I was going to do it and require everyone that worked for me to do it. I would say in one hand, I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't do it for a lot of years, but it took a catastrophe for me to wake up and do it, but that's sometimes what's necessary.
Well, firemen hate two things: change and the way things are.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So if, you made a great point before we started that engine guys, they're inside, they're buried up. They typically are wearing all of their gear
Yes.
and all of their gloves and not, leather work gloves.
Right.
I get it. I mean, we have a thing when we go out and train, a lot of people want to wear their extrication gloves because it's a glove.
Yep.
But it doesn't feel, and you're correct, it does not feel the same when you're holding a Halligan, trying to set a wedge, trying to gap a door. But if we're inside and we're trying to go that way, you're going to have those gloves on. You might as well just practice with them.
Absolutely.
Because again, like when we do bailout training,
Yep.
People want to take the lighter glove because it feels more comfortable, more dexterity, but that's not how we work.
Right. Managing change is an important part of a firefighter in terms of leadership. And I saw every one kind of this philosophy I came up with was that during my time, there were a lot of operational changes, right? When I first came on, we never wore our turnout pants and boots to a structure fire unless it was in the middle of the night, because our turnout pants and boots stayed up in our bedding locker. We would go to a fire in polyester pants and Sears high-top work boots, and it wasn't until we started melting these polyester pants around guys' legs at fires that somebody said, why don't you guys put these on in the middle of the day? Keep them by the rig. And that operational change, we used to see, I remember in the station, every operational change that kind of affected our studliness, we threw rocks at. We'd go, has he lost his mind? Does he know how much longer it's going to take us to get out of quarters if we have to put these boots and pants on? When we got hoods, right, the thermal hoods.
Yeah.
I thought that the commander of emergency operations had lost his mind because our ears are our thermometer. They tell us when we're in too far. And you know what? Every fire I went to, every significant fire I went to, I'd see these firefighters sitting on the tailboard with the paramedics putting a 4x4 over their ear and pouring saline solution over their blistered ear. But we thought when they told us, you got to wear these on every structure fire, that we're going to kill firefighters. You're going to go in too deep. The thermometer's not going to tell you to get out. Guess what? We didn't kill firefighters, and the only difference is I didn't see those guys on the tailboard with the saline solution and the 4x4s over their ears. Open cab apparatus. We had open cab apparatus. When they told me I had to take my truck down to the shops, that they were going to bolt a roof on it, has he lost his mind? How am I going to spot my truck? It was that glamorous look that we wanted the open cab. That's why I'm half deaf, because I drove a fire truck with a siren 4 feet from me, blowing my eardrums out with no hearing protection.
Right.
We didn't wear hearing protection because we had to listen to the radio. There was no intercom system.
Right.
And all these operational changes. I saw the same thing when the data came out about transitional fire attack. Right? We used to laugh at people that squirted from the outside.
Right.
Because he's going to push the fire. And then all of a sudden we see this study that says, no, if done correctly, you're not going to push the fire. You're going to knock most of it down. All these things. But my best firefighters recoiled because it affected your studliness. Those guys that got on the ground, melted the helmets around their head, all that stuff was precluded. And so every operational change we were naturally skeptical of. And I'm assuming it's still the same way.
Absolutely.
But I tell people, keep an open mind. All the computer-driven technology we have that helps us see around the corner before we get on scene, all that stuff has value. And part of being a leader is seeing what's around the corner and then having a positive effect on that change to make us better.
Well, and the other thing is sometimes I think we miss the mark when we talk to subordinates when we sell it.
Yeah.
we don't lead with the why. And I think that's a hard sell because, you know, when it comes down from the head shed that this is what we're doing, it is not typically delivered in the best message. It's just, this is the change and you're going to do it.
One of the things I did as a chief deputy was I promised that there should be no operational change surprises, meaning when I finally issue a training bulletin that says this is now the way we're going to do this, that should not be a surprise out there, meaning I developed like a 10-step process where I would not omit the mission worker from my decision-making process on how to make operational changes.
Right.
So that, and the bottom line is it would kind of preclude me from having to rescind stuff. Because if I just developed it in my corner office on the top of City Hall and then threw it out, and I would have these, I used to call them my fire Nazis, my best firefighters out there go, Chief, have you lost your mind?
Right.
Have you thought about this? And frequently they would be right. So I utilized a lot of those I called them my trusted influencers.
Right.
And what I would do is I'd shoot a draft out to them, say, hey, put some fresh eyes on this thing. We've been developing it. We've looked to see what LA County's doing, what FDNY's doing, what Chicago Fire Department's doing. We've kind of developed this new thought about what piece of equipment or what method and operation, and put some fresh eyes on it. And invariably, they would send back really good information, and it would allow me to massage it and change it. So now when I finally put together the finished product, a lot of these guys go, oh, yeah, this is what we were talking about. This is that, blah, 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 blah. And because exactly what you said, they understood the why, because it wasn't something that came over the desk and the captain goes, what the hell is this? What's he thinking?
Yeah, he's lost his mind.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
we don't. In a lot of the job now, I hear we got a new fireman on our shift that's 20 years old. He is like Joe when Joe started his career, right? Mm-hmm. He's never had a real. I mean, he worked at Walgreens. Super nice kid, super impressionable. He's doing the Lord's work on the engine. He is doing a good job, but to instruct him, we have to teach him an entirely different way than you and I and Matt would have come up.
All right.
It is an entirely different process to get through to him. He's not one of those guys that dumb thumbs on Facebook and TikTok. He wants to learn the job, but it's very difficult because we are older, right? We're at the back end, he's at the front end, and it's trying to make that mesh is very difficult. I mean, it's not easy.
One of the probably the biggest changes from when I first came on to when I left was how we approached teaching members. And one of the things is back then, when I came on, most of us came from the same background. You know, there were very little college-educated people. Most of them came from the military, construction trades. I'll never forget, I was years ago, I was up in our Firemen's Winter Olympics up in Mammoth, and there were a lot of firefighters up there, and there were a lot of like nurses and women, and I meet this gal, and this gal lives close to me.
Okay.
And we're both single, and I said, hey, why don't we get back to town? Why don't I call you up? We'll go out on a date. She goes, are you a firefighter like all these other guys? And I said, well, yeah, baby, thinking that was a big deal. She goes, no offense, but no thank you. And I go, what are you talking about? She goes, no offense, but you guys are all the same. You all wear flannel shirts. You got a pickup truck. You got a wheelbarrow upside down in the back. And I'm thinking to myself, there's 7 trucks in the parking lot. They all got wheelbarrows upside down. Everyone comes to work. And she was right. We all were alike.
Yeah.
Well, when I left, we had people that came from college backgrounds, military backgrounds, everywhere. And you could not approach every student the same way.
Right.
You needed to get them to the same place eventually, but if you had a fireman's kid as your rookie,
right,
who grew up rebuilding motorcycles and helping his dad frame additions in the house, versus a kid that grew up in the inner city and the only thing he knew about a car was where to put gas in, you can't approach those guys the same. You can't have the same initial expectations.
Right.
You have to figure out a way to reach that kid to eventually get him up to that level. And that was a big change in the LAFD is when we started having really diversified backgrounds come into the entry level.
So you guys at the LAFD have your own in-house academy, so you can
Yes.
take somebody from zero to hero, basically.
Yes. There are differences. One of the things is rarely is someone successful in the testing process that hasn't gone through some type of fire academy.
Okay.
They're not going to get that good of an interview. Like a kid like myself, like I said, that knew two things about the fire department, that they rode at red trucks and used axes, you'd never get a high enough score. I would tutor firefighters' kids that would come in. They would have a better resume than I did as a chief deputy coming into the job. They were bilingual. They were already paramedics that had worked for a private ambulance company. They had a master's degree in whatever.
Right.
And they had all this background. But nevertheless, to answer your question, with the exception of the medical end, because you have to be an EMT to come on now also.
Okay.
But with the exception of that, they still started out, this is a match, this is fuel, this is heat, and this is water. And they go through step by step all of the ladder evolutions, hose evolutions, all of the stuff is, it's an intense academy. They still have a pretty high attrition rate. We found that it's better to kind of cull the herd in the academy than it is to get somebody out there and have them not fit and
Sure.
not being able to work. So it's easier to terminate them in the academy than it is in the field. So our academy is very difficult to get through, and we usually spent a lot of time in making sure that staff was super qualified, so that if they got through that academy, one of the things was I had some of my best firefighters as the captains and the drill masters out there. So when invariably I'd get a call from a captain in the station, it was a buddy of mine, and say, hey, what is up with these rookies you're sending me? They're crappy. I would say, hey, he got through Ruben Navarro at the tower. And I'm telling you, for him to get through Captain Navarro, he's got what it takes. So you figure out a way to teach him. And one of the things I wanted to do was I would, the typical thing is this rookie's a piece of crap. He can't get it. And I go, hey, what I want to hear is I want to hear the 10 things you did. I want to hear that you gave him your cell phone number. So when he's on 4 days, he's got a question, he can call you. I want to hear that this guy came in every day off duty and people were helping him, not ridiculing him or humiliating him, not initiating him. They were teaching him. And what I said is I want you captains, when you have a rookie that's not making it, I want you to look yourself in the mirror and say, what am I doing that's precluding this guy from not getting it? What you take the responsibility. I'm paying you extra money to teach this guy. Teach him.
Right.
And is everyone gonna pass? Of course not. But if I felt that if people really embrace that responsibility, for me to figure out a way to teach, it's not for you to figure out a way to learn my stuff, then we were kind of on the right path to how we should approach educating these guys.
Boy, that's some shit right there.
Yeah.
There is not enough ownership from leadership. It's this person doesn't work. This person is not a fit. They need to go somewhere else. And what you said is, no, tell me 10 things you've done.
Yep.
And when you said that, it's like, that stung. That stung. Listening to that to somebody else, that stung them because they're like, it caused them to reflect and say, what have I contributed to this person's success, not their demise?
Yeah, exactly.
That's very huge. We talked earlier. I can't remember if it was on the phone when you and I talked last. You talked about something that was wildly unpopular that you did when the cancer rates started to go up with your instructors.
Yep.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we had, like a lot of people, burn containers, flashover simulators, and one of the things that we figure out as fire departments is that with declining fires, how can we prepare the members to be able to read smoke conditions, to be able to reduce the volatility of the evolving, heat temp curve, and all these techniques that we learned as firefighters of how to make things safer, how to we all get tired of reading those NIOSH reports of them saying we're going in, everything was great, we had good visibility, and all of a sudden it got bad. And I always say BS. Not all of a sudden. You missed some stuff. Right. Either you weren't educated or you didn't know, but you missed something. Or maybe the guy outside missed something. It doesn't always, it does eventually, suddenly get bad, but there's stuff. So how can we do this? And we had these burn containers, and I had my absolute best firefighters and captains be instructors out there. And one of the things, and all of a sudden one time the union called me. They said, hey, have you read that report about the type of plywood you guys are using in the burn containers, how it's a carcinogen? I go, no, I haven't. Send it to me. They sent it to me. I had a city attorney that worked for me in my office. I took it to her and I said, look at this. She goes, are you using this type of plywood? She goes, yeah. She goes, stop it today. Shut the burn container down today. And I said, really? She goes, yep. I'm telling you right now, this is what I'm reading is factual, and it was good. It was based on data. She goes, we are putting our people way at risk. And so we called out there and I did it, and we shut it down. And these guys, they were all my friends. I loved every one of them like my own son. They were howling like a set of bad breaks. What are you doing, Chief? This is the best training we have. Blah, blah, blah. And they were pissed. And basically, we had to develop a policy. We had to burn a different type of plywood. We had to have them they were taking these turnouts that were going through, 10 fires a day, taking them back to the station, sitting around at the kitchen table with them. This was before all of this data became known that you can't do that. And then the one thing that this report said is that these guys that go on these, do 5 burns a day in the burn container over the course of 10 months, they have had the same exposure as a 50-year career in 1 month. It's just, It was amazing. And the ironic and sad thing about it is there's 2 or 3 members that were my best people, are my best people, and were my best people that are now in a fight for their life because they have cancer running through their body. And again, it's not anything anybody did that was negligent. We just didn't know. Right. But having the courage, and I talk about courage in a number of different ways, but having the courage to pull the trigger and say, that's not happening anymore, when you're going to, get ridiculed by it. But the bottom line is, and stuff like that, to reduce our exposure. The exposure we used to place ourselves into when we do overhaul. Right. No SCBAs. Back then, and it should be completely different now than it was back 25 years ago. But that's why a lot of guys in my timeline, they retire and everything is great, and they wake up with a cough one day 4 years after they retire, and they go in and they see a spot on their lung, and they do the biopsy, and the guy dead 4 months later. It breaks your heart. Right. So I am happy in the direction a lot of people are going to better protect themselves. Sure. And reduce the amount of toxicity and exposure when you can. Right. I loved a sauna. I bought a sauna at the house, and I sauna almost every other day. Okay. So at least that's getting it's great for cardiac, but two, it forces me to meditate. Absolutely. And take the beating, if you will, and it makes all that toxicity sweat out, the data there. Yep. And so that and a cold plunge really, it makes me feel better. Yep. And there's not enough of people doing that. It's cost prohibitive. Yep. And we can't put a sauna in every firehouse. Exactly. It's not cost effective, but to do something at a personal level to say, I know, I had a scare last year with the growth on my brainstem, and I couldn't figure out why I was losing fine motor skills. Little things weren't making sense. Right. And I played in a golf tournament, came home. I could sleep literally for 8 hours, wake up for 2, go back to sleep for 8 more. And if I was on shift, it was brutal. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out why, right? The why of,
Multiple MRIs later, boom, there we find it, and off we go. Treatments, everything's good. But the doctor, when he and I were talking, like you and I are right now in a room, we went to his actual office.
Right.
And we sat down. He said, I don't know if it's cancer, but in your profession, it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And, I hate that is the job that we're in, because I feel like I've come up in I was at the tail end. We rode the tailboard for 6 months, right? Things changed, enclosed apparatus, and now you're in the job of, PFAS is no more, with the foam and the gear. Everything has changed, but we were exposed to that for a number of years.
Absolutely.
So that dynamic is there, right?
Yep.
It's not if, it's when. And managing that risk, I bet the first words out of their mouth was about pay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you were taking hard chargers' money.
Yep. They were making a lot of money in overtime, and I was glad to pay them because they were doing a great service. But yeah, that was a big issue. And even though it's just funny, we typically don't take advantage of a lot of the things that are available to us to make sure that we stay healthy.
Sure.
We recently had a real close friend, workmate, is retired, go in and he's my age. He's 67 years old, and he went in and had stage 4 cancer, pancreas that metastasized to his heart, lungs, and liver. And he died about 6 months later. Well, the funny thing is so it started in his colon. I'm sorry. And I asked a really close friend of his, what did his last colonoscopy say? And he said, Joe, he's never had one. 67 years old. Well, that flabbergasted me with our exposure that this guy wouldn't take advantage of a routine exam. That type of cancer, if caught early, it's fully treatable.
Yeah.
And if you don't catch it early, you're basically dead. And the funny part is I'm telling this story to like 14 guys at a golf event, right? And I'm saying, and we're all the same age, we're all retired. And I'm saying, yeah, did you hear about, so-and-so? I'm like, oh, yeah, it's so bad. And I said, can you believe he's never had a colonoscopy? Half of these idiots at the table had never had a colonoscopy. I said, what do you guys, I go, hey, I don't like having something shoved up my butt as much as the next guy, but the bottom line is they put you to sleep, and you wake up and everything's hunky dory, but you're gonna have this sense of relief that you're not sick. That's everyone's biggest fears,
right?
Having this cancer run through your body, and,
right? Not knowing it.
Not knowing, and it's not fair to your family. It's not fair to anybody else. And get checked up.
You have good insurance.
Yeah, exactly. It's all paid for.
Take advantage.
Yeah. And we were breathing that stuff. I mean, we for years didn't have enclosed pole holes. So the dormitories on the second floor, when the engine would run out, the diesel exhaust, you're basically living in a garage, and for years, we were doing that. We had this person come out and study the station, and they were going to study the effects of the that we had at fires, right? There was kind of some type of scientist or something. Well, they're in the station the very first day, and they're going to respond out with us at fires. Well, they're in the station, in the kitchen, the doors are open, and the engine runs out on a run, and this guy's looking, and because the diesel exhaust went right by the kitchen door, and it went into the kitchen, and he goes, "Are you kidding me?" And then he took a sample off the wall in the kitchen. He went up in the dorms. Long story short, he never went to a fire. Because he goes, I don't need to go to a fire. I can tell you right now why you guys are having these high incidents of brain cancer, because you got diesel exhaust running into your bedroom, and so all that stuff.
You're breathing it.
That stuff bodes well for you. You hit it right on the nail on the head. It's not if, but when we're going to get cancer.
Right.
For our age people.
It's just an occupational. It's a known risk, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is with presumptive laws and things like that have changed. We have decent enough health care that we can get checked out. Certainly. We can get the treatment. The problem is hard chargers seldom want help.
Yep.
In anything we do.
Yep.
Right? Like we don't want that. We want to, I'm big enough, I'm bad enough, I can get through it. And to admit that we need help means that we're weak.
Exactly.
That's tough.
Yep.
It's a tough sell for an alpha personality.
Yeah.
What is your favorite firehouse story something that happened on the job that just has stuck with you through all your years?
There's so many stories. I mean, some are funny, some are are heartwarming. I think one of the big incidents I went on that I tell, and I remember I got a call one time from a guy that was doing that Seattle Fire Department TV show. I've never seen it, but he was writing scripts for it. He goes, "Can you tell me some firehouse stories?" Well, none of them were, Hollywoodish enough for him to do. But I told him one of the stories, and I actually did a TED Talk a while back, and I told this story, and it was one of the first incidents I ever went on, a big fire. And we had this, I was on the truck company, and we had an engine company, and we get dispatched, and we were out training. We had ladders up all over this building. It was on a Saturday. We responded, reported structure fire. And the engine didn't have ladders out. They were coming back from a rescue run. So they get there quicker than we do. They report a single-family dwelling, heavy fire smoke showing, fill out the assignment, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're responding, listening to this. And as we roll up, at this fire station, there were 12 people assigned. 4 of them were named Joe. Joe Castro, Joe Napolitano, Joe Klein, Joe Tejera. Joe Tejera was a former West Point graduate. They called him G.I. Joe. Joe Klein was a single bachelor, good-looking guy. They called him Macho Joe. I was young Joe because I was 18 years old, and the old guy was 42 years old. We called him Fossil Joe. Well, as we're rolling up on this fire, I see Fossil Joe carrying a woman out of this front door with literally fire and smoke going over his head, right in front of my eyes. 2 months on the job, I seen him carrying this woman out, and they told us that what had happened was there was an abandoned car in the driveway of this house. These 4 little girls were playing with matches in the car. Started a fire. They couldn't get out. Eventually, the family members saw them, broke the windows, pulled the little girls out, and they were all burned pretty bad. And then that fire then started the house on fire, and Fossil Joe, was pulling Grandma out, who was bedridden. He went in there and saved her. And I'll never forget, we loaded these girls in. Again, I wasn't an EMT. I knew very little about medical stuff. But I remember we put this girl on a gurney, and we're rolling her to the ambulance, and she's holding her hands up, and there's skin dripping from her hands. And she's screaming and crying, and she looked at me and said, "Am I having a dream?" She looked at me and said that. And I remember, I'm an 18-year-old kid, right? And I go, "Yeah, sweetie, you're having a dream. Go back to sleep." And she closed her eyes and went to, closed her eyes. Later on, her parents would bring her to the station, had horribly burned hands. And that was one of my first customer service things. And why I bring this story up, and why is one of my favorite stories, is I witnessed something that a lot of firefighters never do in their career. He carried a woman out of a burning building. Absolutely, without question, saved her life. He wasn't there. He never spoke of that thing again. Nothing was ever brought up about that. We didn't come back and go, "Oh, Joe, man, you were badass. You carried that gal out." No one ever spoke of it. He never spoke of it. He was not nominated for an award or when it's just a different era. And to me, that was the purest example of public service. A guy carried a woman out of a burning building, saved her life, never spoke of it again. And to me, and this guy was a hero of mine. He was that old firefighter that we all idolize.
Right.
He was 40 years old. And my dad wasn't even 40 then. So, it was like this, "Hey, old man, take your pension." But here was this badass guy that carried this gal out. That remains one of my favorite incident firehouse stories, seeing that happen.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
To be a part of a rescue's,
Yep.
it's a real deal.
Yep.
What when you talk about your time, you hit on something earlier as a chief. You talked about transitional attack. You talked about the data behind it, and guys I'm one of those guys. Give me 30 more seconds, Chief. How many times have you heard that in your career when you're seeing something outside that matches what I'm telling you doesn't match the conditions you're seeing?
That's a great question. And to me, the value of a command and control entity, right? The BC that's out there, sitting in the suburban, manning the command post. And my thought has always been is that we get paid, the chief officers get paid to connect the dots. What you're seeing is one thing. What you're hearing from the roof is another thing. What you're hearing from the inside is another thing. You're weighing that against the potential risk and the potential gain. The gain is that we're going to save half of this person's house or half of this person's business. The potential gain is we're going to rescue somebody that may be trapped in there. The risk is obvious. But what the chief officer gets paid to do, or the command and control entity, whether you're chief or your captain out there running that incident, is you get paid to reconcile those differences. And one of the things that as chief officers we do is we're sometimes handcuffed by the efficiency of great captains. Meaning, I used to roll on scenes at BC, got a single family dwelling, I put somebody on the fire, I back them up, put somebody on the roof, put somebody above the fire floor, and I put them in the right position, give them the right objectives, and then all I do is say Roger 20 times. Hey, Chief, this is Engine 13. We're inside. We've got initial water on a fire. Roger, Engine 13. Hey, Chief, this is Truck 29 on the roof. We got a hole open, access to the attic, heavy fire. Roger, Truck 13. And then, hey, we got knocked down on the fire. We're going to start a primary search. Roger. Hey, we've conducted a secondary search. Roger, because they're great. They're great captains. But what happens is every once in a while you get those calls like, hey, we got heavy heat and fire. We can't find heat and smoke. We can't find the fire. And what do these BCs do? Roger. No, that's not a Roger message. I want you to reconcile why. And you may have to ask the truck what they're seeing and what it is. But contrary to that, or a point is that when you say, hey, we need, hey, this isn't looking good from the outside. I used to say that, hey, it's looking bad from the outside, guys. What are we looking at here inside? Roger, we can't find it. Give me 5 more minutes. Or how's the roof look? Chief, we got a lot of good roof to cut up here. And all these things, having the courage to pull the trigger. And I'll never forget when we went to a fire, I watched it burn from the first floor. I was a division supervisor on the back side, the Delta side of the building where all the companies were going in. Commercial fire in the middle of the day, downtown LA. I watched it burn from the first floor to the second floor, through the out through. And these guys aren't getting it. And finally, I tell the IC, this is looking like a loser. I've been here, if the reason they give us that 10 minutes on the incident clock, 20 minutes we got 25 minutes on the incident clock, and this fire's bigger than when we got here. And I tell the IC, hey, it's not looking good. My advice is we pull the trigger and pull everybody out. So he goes, okay, good. Mayday, everyone out of the building, emergency truck, pull everybody out, and we pull everybody out. One of the captains that came down sees me standing out there in the parking lot. God damn it, Joe, we almost had it. We were right there. He's like in my face yelling at me. And he was a tough dude, former Navy pilot. And his name was Dennis. I said, Dennis, copy, get your ladder pipe up, put the fire out. Well, later on, I was thinking about this interaction. Later on in the night, I decided to drive over to the station. And I say, hey, Dennis, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what happened there at that fire. His arms are crossed, and he's pissed at me. And I said, listen, I was there for 20 minutes watching you guys inside that building. 20 minutes. I didn't see one remnant of water on that fire. And at some point on a building, when I know we're not going to save any life, and it's already burned through the ceiling, at some point you have to respect my desire to pull your ass out of that building so that nobody gets hurt. And I go, guess what? You want to stay in there? You want to have fun? Show me some progress. I gave you 20 minutes and you didn't do it. You failed, not me. And as I'm doing this, he's kind of seeing, you know what, he's kind of right. So I sat there for 20. What do you want me to do, Dennis? I gave you 20 minutes. I didn't see one whitening of, that you got, and you didn't have water on the fire. It's a commercial building. We're not saving anybody. I know your wife. I don't want to go to your funeral. You want to play? Give me some progress. And so he looks at me and he says, Joe, you're right. Would you mind talking to my crew and telling my crew this? And I said, and this was not the kind of guy that would ever let anybody talk to his crew. He was a true leader. This guy was a badass. And I said, well, sure, Dennis, but why don't you tell him? He goes, to be honest, I've been telling him for the last 2 hours that you turned into a big pussy. You turned into a big chicken shit. And you know what? What you said is correct. And I'd like you to come in there and us talk together. And I'm going to apologize to him. And he did. But what more important to me was that I go, this guy wasn't in my battalion. He was outside my battalion.
Sure.
And I go, I've never sat and had this talk with my guys. So afterwards, I told him, I go, guys, I want to tell you the 10 things I'm thinking about before I ever pull the trigger to pull you out. This isn't something that happens. I'm evaluating, and I told him that. And I said, I get it. I've been there. But you want to stand there and have fun? Then show me some progress. And if I'm in there, you're in there for 15 minutes, and there's nobody to save, then I'm pulling you out at that point. And it's just kind of funny. There's been other fires where we had one where a BC buddy of mine said, I wanted nothing more than to pull everybody out of that building. But I had 10 people hanging from windows. And, it was a center hallway apartment downtown LA where disgruntled tenant poured gas down the hallway at 2 a.m. and lit it off. Oh. And he rolled on scene. He got people hanging out of windows. He had like 3 emergency triggers, people hitting the button, 3 emergency traffics, which mean that was our Mayday call back then. He goes, they were all legitimate, and I wanted nothing more than to pull everybody out of that building. But with 15 people hanging out of windows, I couldn't do it. And that's kind of the in a simplistic sense, the whole concept of risk management.
Right.
It's
tough because you could have and it comes back to your point about test taking. People can be a great test taker until the sugar turns to shit.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you can't pick A, B, C, or D is the correct answer, because there is no correct answer when you're faced with getting punched in the mouth with 15 people hanging out of windows.
So true.
And that's the hard part that our job doesn't prepare people for, I don't think.
Absolutely.
We expect people to be a good test taker, a good memorizer, and a good tactician. But when it comes to putting all of that into one incident out the windshield, that is a tough sell.
Yep.
Because, like you said, fires are on the decline. So the people with enough fires to make decisions, capable decisions, competent decisions, are tough to come by on the fire ground.
No doubt. And I was a big believer at it's like when we used to, I'd pull up as a chief deputy sometimes, and as I was responding from home, and I would hear them pull everybody out of the building. And I would usually go up to that chief when in a calmer moment, and I'd say, hey, I heard you pulled anyone out of the building, and I'm not making any judgment on it, but I want you to tell me why you pulled them out of the building. Just didn't feel right, chief. I get that. Why didn't it feel right? And they weren't able to explain. They weren't able to say, I evaluated the following 6 things.
Sure.
And I was a big believer, but I deep down believe that what made him not feel good about it was he was subconsciously evaluating things, right? So, but I was a believer at then taking that notion and codifying it in a step-by-step process. Meaning saying, okay, one of the things was, when they say we got 15 minutes on the incident clock, I always say you need to step back, and the first thing I want you to analyze is the fire bigger than when you got there? And if it is, why is it? And what we tend to do is we think we don't have enough resources. So when we're not making progress, Alan Brunacini from Phoenix Fire Department used to say, what we do, we put more people on it. We do the wrong things harder. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is. We do need more hose lines to overcome the BTUs. But frequently, we have, in a structure fire, I always thought my department with so many resources, if we're not getting to see the fire, it's usually a construction anomaly that precludes us from getting there. But you need to figure that out, and you need to figure either out a way around it or you need to change your strategy. But I was a big believer, and one of the things I did was I codified a policy of what I want you to do when you roll on scene and they give you 10 minutes on the incident clock. Because I would watch these chiefs, they say, hey, Battalion 5 or Hollywood IC from Metro Dispatch, you got 10 minutes on the incident clock. I see the BC go, Roger, Metro, put it back. And I said, no. I want you to tell me what you're thinking about when they do that. I want you to step away from the radio, and I want you to look. And has the smoke color changed? Has the fire gotten bigger? Is this an escapable building? That's a biggie. Why don't we lose nationwide? Why don't we lose firefighters in residential buildings, and we lose more firefighters in commercial? Because there's an exit hole every 12 feet. Right. And professional firefighters can get their ass out of those buildings. You got a building that has one way in, one way out, cinder block construction, no windows. The guy gets lost in there, flashes, he's not going to make it out. And those are the type of all of these, like these factors. Is it collapsible? Do we have escape potential? What's the smoke telling me? Is the smoke telling me contents only or contents and structure? I want you to evaluate these things. So when I pull up, after you've ordered everyone out, and I say, why'd you pull them out? A, Chief, the fire had gotten bigger since in the 20 minutes. B, it wasn't really an escapable structure. I had 2 companies in there. C, I didn't have adequate safety oversight. I didn't have a rapid intervention team. And I go, it's only going to take you 30 seconds to go over these 6 things that I've written down. And if you want to make it 8, you tell me the 2 ones you want to add to it. But I was a big believer that a lot of people were doing this subconsciously, but I wanted to codify a process. It's the same thing with emergency traffic. What are you going to do?
Right.
We had guys screw that up. Somebody, Mayday, Mayday, I'm lost. And then I remember back then we wanted, when you heard somebody screaming, and we called it back then, our first iteration was red alert. When somebody said, when the commanding IC said red alert, everyone shut up on the radio, right? Well, so this IC is running the fire, and all of a sudden you hear this guy, my name, I'm firefighter Graciano, I'm lost, I need help. And he goes to key the mic, he can't remember the term red alert. And he's going, and he's telling us this later at a training deal.
Right.
And we had this clinical psychologist that said, you suffered from anomia. Anomia is when you're in a traumatic thing, you can't remember a word, right? So, and I remember an old chief goes, we never call it anomia, we just call it having your head up your butt. But the bottom line is, this was a real thing to prepare for. Are you going to be able to remember the word Mayday? So what we did was on all battalion sedans, we had a 5-step process when you heard a guy in trouble. And it was first, do Mayday. Second, 3, 4, 5. So you could at least glance over, and in this worst incident of your career as a chief officer, you're going to have a way to get you through this if you lock up. And we all need that.
Everybody makes mistakes, right? I mean, you have auditory exclusions in stressful situations, memory exclusions. You sometimes lock up verbally.
Yep.
To be able to look at something and have a prompt. Now, where I'm not on that same page is when we have a picture of like an 8.5 by 11 in an engine. You should be able to pull up and be able to give a size up without having to have a script.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, but, we all have, I'm sure every department policy has what 5 things a size up should include.
Right.
Right. And we memorize that and you be able to do it. When we talk about those not commonly occurring, low frequency, high risk type incidents, that's where you need a little bit of help. We've all been sucker punched at an incident. And really what would sucker punch me should be significantly more complex than what sucker punches the 2 kids on a rescue that roll up first, that have 3 years on the job. And I used to think, how do you develop that skill set of whatever, when you don't know what the hell to do, how are you going to do that? When there was that fire back in, I think it was in Warwick.
Yeah, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, okay.
Yep.
and all those people, first in company came and people were piled up like cordwood,
Yep.
they stampeded. And I was working in Hollywood as a BC then, and I remember thinking, that could happen here. We have these dance clubs and blah, blah, blah. So I had a captain's meeting, and I used a military concept called the red team and the blue team. And I gave them a scenario just like that. You roll up at 1718 West Hollywood Boulevard, and you reported smoke. You're on an engine by yourself, and you see light smoke coming out of the front door, and you look, and you see heads stacked up like cordwood. Just exactly what happened. And I said, what I want you to do is these captains, you 5 captains, I want you to use everything in our current department policy that's going to tell you how you're going to run that incident, how you're going to size it up, what you're going to do. This group over here, I want you to throw away every department policy, and I want you to do the extraordinary thing that's probably going to make me laugh. Okay, so I give them like 30 minutes. These guys come back. Okay, we're going to size it up. We're going to develop an MCI incident. We're going to put the red tarp and the green tarp for immediate minor delay. We're going to put a company on the roof. We're going to blah, 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 blah. These guys over here, they were my wild cards. What are you going to do? Okay, we're going to take the engine. We're going to go on the Charlie side of that building, which is all masonry. We're going to crash the engine through the wall to make a big enough hole to rescue everybody. And everyone starts laughing. I go, that is exactly what I want. And don't get me wrong. If you do that tonight, I'm going to kick your ass from here to the county line. You crash. But what I want is your ability in an extraordinary situation to do what's necessary to save the most lives. And sometimes in those extraordinary incidents, our standard operating guidelines are insufficient. Right. So it's to develop that skill set, you have to be innovative in training to get these guys to think critically and cognitively of how to get themselves through an incident that they've never been to that size and scope and magnitude.
Well, and then you empowered them to make a decision.
Absolutely.
That's another thing that's very difficult right now in this job is that a lot of people have been micromanaged by people that your generation's retired.
Yep.
And so now we're faced with these people that are kind of in between.
Yep.
They got their asses kicked a little too hard. So now they don't want to kick anybody's asses.
Yep.
And there's no good decisions. I mean, I still work for a 30-year chief. Mm-hmm. So I'm thankful. I'm very happy because it's how I was raised. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be working there.
Right.
Right. So I'm very thankful for that. But we have a lot of, newer, younger bosses because it's attrition, right?
Yep.
It's the, what do you call that? The sign of the times.
Yeah.
If you will.
It's a good point in that when I was driving a truck in AO and I had this captain, and he was a great captain, old school guy, and I was studying for captain. And back then, we were rule followers, and everyone came from the military, and we used to have on every apparatus a brass plaque that said only authorized fire department employees can ride on this vehicle, stamped on every rig in the LAFD. We're coming back from a fire in South Central LA about 1 a.m., and we pull up to a red light, and we look, and there's a little old man sitting on a bus bench, right? Old guy, white hair. And the captain, open cab apparatus, captain goes, "Hey, Pops, how you doing?" He goes, "Oh, good. Just waiting for the bus." Guy goes, "It's 1 in the morning. I don't think the bus is coming." And he gets this confused look on his face. He's an old guy. He's 80 years old, right? And the captain goes, "Where do you stay? Where do you live?" He goes, "Oh, I stay over at 79th and Hoover." It's like 2 districts over from us. So the captain looks at me, goes, turns around on the firefighter, "Put him on the rig." Put him on the rig, gets his seatbelt, looks at me, 79th and Hoover. 2 districts out of our district, right? To me, we're violating 10 rules. We're violating putting somebody on the rig, 2 out of our district. We take him home. His wife's waiting on the porch for him. The guy had dementia, and we return him home. So we're driving back, and the captain says to me, "Okay, Captain Castro, you get this in your interview question. How are you going to answer it? You going to put him on the rig?" I go, "Hell no." He goes, "Why not?" He says, "Right there. Only fire department employees on the rig." "So what are you going to do? You going to leave him sitting there at 1 o'clock in the morning?" I go, "No, we're going to call the cops. Have police deal with it." He goes, "Joe, it's Friday night at 1 a.m., South Central LA. It's going to take an hour for the police to get here on this type of call. They low priority. They're busy.
Right.
So now all of a sudden we're gonna now be out of service for an hour. What, it took us 5 minutes to drive this guy, and now we're coming back? Yeah. Joe, if you need to break a rule on this job, why did we break it? We broke it to accomplish a mission of the department, which is save lives and protect property. We took care of this citizen. This thing that we did that broke the rule was consistent with the intent and spirit of the mission of this job. So you can do it. Have the courage, and your boss should have the flexibility to trust you to do that. And that stayed with me for a long time. Operationally, it makes same sense. In even work environment issues, and that was the kind of supervisor I became. I wanted to empower them to make the right decision based on the intent and spirit of the mission of the fire department. Now, we know guys make the wrong decision. They go out of their district because they want to get a good deal on a sandwich, right? Yeah, they're half-price sandwiches, even though we're now 11 miles out of our district.
Right.
And so I used to say, make your decision. Whatever decision you make, you better be able to convince me that's in the best interest of Mrs. Smith and your ability to provide service to her in your district. And if you can convince me that that was the case, and getting a sandwich or getting a deal on running shoes isn't one of those reasons.
Right.
It makes sense. And what it does, it gives your employees the tools to make the best informed decision. It's going to keep their ass out of trouble. That's important.
Well, the other thing is that, you could be out on a search for a guy. You're saving yourself a little bit of work by trying to do the right thing for the man.
Yep, absolutely.
And if we can't put people on a fire department apparatus, you're driving so poorly that we can't trust you. We can trust you to drive emergency traffic with this $1 million piece of equipment, but we can't trust you to take Mr. or Mrs. Smith to their house in the middle of the night when they're lost and having an episode.
What's funny about that is I was teaching at a symposium, that leadership symposium that Phoenix Fire Department used to run years ago, and Chief Brunacini was still a chief. And I became friends with him, and I'm talking to him about that incident, right? Tell him about this experience I had. And he goes, Joe, what safer place for them to be on than a 17-ton truck with a seatbelt on? He goes, why do you guys have that policy? It's stupid.
It is dumb.
Yeah.
But it becomes, and the one thing that I always hear is insurance. Insurance says, I've talked with a number of people that do fire department insurance, especially like VFIS. They're a big insurer of career and volunteer departments. And I'm telling you right now, they're like, we don't care. I had an insurer tell me from VFIS, I don't care if you go into the fire in your underwear, we're still going to cover you.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying by any means that is how you should conduct yourself. Mm-hmm. But if you're acting with the intent of trying to, like what you said, to do the right thing for the mission, then we need to really back off this whole liability thing and really just focus on what we're supposed to do.
Absolutely. You still have to mitigate it, though. And I'll give you an example. If I guarantee you, every guy that's driving way too fast and running through a red light can try to rationalize it by saying, I was just trying to help Mrs. Smith get there fast. So there has to be kind of a rationale to that. But you're absolutely right. It's a balancing act, and it has to be authentically because once you say it's okay to break the rules, then where do you stop that? But it's all about educating your people and allowing them to make that best informed decision.
Well, you know how hard it is to reel. I mean, you're one of us. It's hard to reel us back in.
Yep.
You know how hard you were as a young man.
Yep.
To reel in. And now you had 90-something chiefs reporting to you.
Yep. And
let's just say half of those were like you. That's 40-something people that are like you that you got to reel in. That's almost unmanageable.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've been at this about an hour and 45 minutes. And we typically wrap this up with a kind of a words of wisdom, something that you want to say or that's on your mind. It could be a quote or it could be a leadership thought or a funny story, whatever you want to close this thing out with, because we know your time is valuable here.
One time I was asked, what made you successful as a supervisor and a manager on the fire department? And one of the conclusions I came to was that looking at the thousands of guys I worked with, guys and girls I worked with, that with maybe the exception of less than 1%, everybody came to work with the same thought in mind. They wanted to have a great day. And I don't care, they wanted to give the best drill, they wanted to perform the best at an emergency, save somebody's life. If they were cooking dinner, they wanted to cook the best dinner. They never come to work with a thought that I want to screw up and I want to piss the captain off. That's never their thought. Everyone comes with that single thought of, I want this to be a good day. Now, as a supervisor, when you have a guy that doesn't have that good day, when he makes a mistake at a fire, when he cooks a crappy meal, when he puts on a crappy drill, and the time-honored, used to be, LAFD method, when that person didn't achieve that, was you go over and you stick a finger in their eye. You dipshit, and we used to, but I go, if you, kind of dovetails something I said earlier, if you as a supervisor, when that person doesn't achieve what you want them to do you stick the finger in their eye, or do you excuse yourself and go in your dorm and look in the mirror and say, what did I do in my behavior, my teaching, my mentoring of this person that would allow them to think that either this was okay or that resulted in this substandard behavior performance? And you accept responsibility for it and then fix the problem. Fix the problem. Don't always go stick your finger in that eye. And when I started looking at, like, I would have to, in my final position, when people would be suspended and I would have them come to my office before they returned to duty. And it wasn't to hash over the incident that they'd been disciplined for. It was to figure out a way, them and I, collectively, how not to get them in that position. And again, I almost every one of those instances, when I'd read the whole report, I could draw a line back to a company officer, a captain, that didn't do their job at some point. And that's why I think that the captain's position is the most important. They have control and hands on the mission worker every day. And the captain that gets buried in the administrative end of the job and spends all day up in the front office and doesn't know what's going on in what I used to call the back office, the apparatus floor, is the guy that gets in trouble. The captain that says, I got a lot of administrative work to do, but I'm going to push it aside, and if I have to take it home and do it at home, I'm going to take it at home. But I need to be out there with the men and women, the mission worker, participating, getting to know them, what makes them mad, what's happening in their family, and you got to be, I used to say, showing up gets you a 90, just showing up. And that's my advice to supervisors, is you got to show up, and that gets you a 90. You got to know your people, prepare your people, and that's kind of my parting thought.
Man, that's good shit. That's good shit. Because showing up is a big part of the battle.
Big time.
But if we're going to go to war, I want to know about who I'm going to war with. I want to know what makes them tick.
Yep.
That is an important piece. Because if you know that, you know how to manage them in a stressful situation and what they might do.
Huge.
But investing that time, and it's tough because it's a balance.
Yep.
I totally agree that the captain has the most power in the firehouse.
Yep.
But when it comes to where you were at on the top floor, you had the ability to do a lot of good things.
Yep.
And that's important. Well, man, I tell you, I've been watching golf out the window. I'm sorry. It's not that you've been boring. It's just that this place has a pull on anybody that loves the game of golf.
Absolutely. We're right now sitting at a window that a poorly hit shot on number 17 could hit this exactly where, and I'm just hoping that our tee balls end up in that fairway rather than in this hotel here.
Yeah,
Jeremy.
or not that pop bunker over there. I hit that reverse last year. That was not good. There. Well, look, my parting thought actually has to do with this hole in golf. Typically, we give a leadership quote or something, but Ben Crenshaw said this years ago. It said, the reason that the road hole at St. Andrews is the most difficult and par 4 in golf, it was designed as a par 6.
I couldn't agree more.
This is one of the toughest holes on the golf course.
It is.
It's beautiful to wake up and look out over the bay and these courses and know that this place is still respected. It's Matt's first trip here. On Sunday, I told him, there's no golf on the old course, and that the people will actually be out on the, walking in the fairways with their dogs, and there's no dog excrement anywhere. And people are super respectful. They love the game. I mean, you look down, there's not a divot in sight. We've probably had 30 or 40 golfers go past us just in the time we've been here. People care and respect, right? And a lot of firemen golf because I think that it's a self-control thing and it gives them time to focus. But it's something that, makes me happy. And I was happy that you wanted to sit down with us. I appreciate you taking the time with us. I'll repay the debt somehow to you. But we thank you. I hope you can cash many more paychecks more paychecks that are pension related than paychecks.
Me too. So it's all good. Yeah, I've had a great run, and just to feel very grateful and privileged to be sitting here with you, the home of golf, talking fire department stuff, and looking forward to the next 4 days.
Amen to that. Well, we appreciate you tuning in to the Halligans and Half Wheels podcast. Remember to train hard. We are all that they have.